Welcome to our podcast on the house. This is our first podcast for 2026. And we are going to explore why builders keep building homes that only the rich can afford. My name is Reena Agrawal, and I'm a senior research economist at Veros Real Estate Solutions.
And my name is Eric Fox. I'm the chief economist here at Veros Real Estate Solutions. Reena, I know this podcast for us is a little different than some other podcasts. Generally speaking, when we put a podcast together, we brainstorm a topic. We then have some ideas what the outline of that topic might be. We go out and do a little research, of course, having our own thoughts as to where that's going to lead. We come back and put together the outline of the podcast, and generally it falls into line with what our thoughts are. This time, I have to say, we were, at least I was, totally surprised by what we found. And I think you will be too, when we started looking at the data and we saw what was out there and causing some of the things that are going on today. So that was a big revelation for me, thinking I knew just about everything there was to know about the U.S. housing market, yet this was something I was completely taken aback by.
I agree with you. So to kind of set the stage for our discussion about why builders are building homes for the rich, we need to talk about the affordability crisis that has been happening in the US for the last 2 or 3 years. And that has been happening because home prices have increased by 40% in some places to 60% from the beginning of the pandemic until now. Mortgage rates jumped from around 3% in 2022 to over 7%. They're kind of now above 6%, despite the Fed cutting rates 3 times in 2024 and another 3 times in 2025. We are seeing that incomes are not keeping pace with the rise in house prices. And then there is a shortage of starter homes or entry-level homes, which is causing prices to remain high, and affordability issue comes at the forefront given all of this.
And we even started to address some of this in a previous podcast where we looked at some potential activities that the current administration is looking at to improve housing affordability. And one was with a 50-year mortgage, and one was to prohibit the purchase of homes by institutional investors or large purchasers of homes. And I even saw some articles in this week on that latter topic in the Wall Street Journal. So that's still very front and center in the housing market news. So we encourage you to watch one of our previous podcasts if you're interested in that. But today we're really focused on this aspect of new construction and why are builders continuing to go upscale.
So even though the administration has proposed these policies, another one of them being the purchase of $200 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, none of these policies addresses the real issue, that is the shortage of homes in the US. And it seems really logical when we see this whole backdrop, this scenario, that there is a shortage of entry-level homes, that there is an affordability crisis, that the logical solution to this conundrum will be that builders build plenty, full supply of entry-level affordable homes. But that doesn't seem to be happening.
No, it does not. And I have a couple sets of statistics I wanted to provide here just to sort of convince myself. I thought, well, it seems to me like maybe people still are buying entry-level homes. People are still getting into entry-level homes, and we're just not hearing about it as much. So I was looking at kind of the socioeconomic situation for younger folks. And if we look at how many younger folks own their own home and are married by the age of 30. So if we look at what that number was in 1960, what would you guess? I'm putting Reena on the spot. She doesn't know this. What would you think that number was back in 1960?
Probably 40%.
It was 54%. She usually gets these spot on. So I was afraid she was going to say 54%.
I'll just claim I wasn't born then. That's why I don't know the answer.
Now, what do you think that number was in 2000?
More like 33, 35%.
It was 25%. And what do you think that number is today?
Half of that?
So you're thinking 12?
Yes.
It's 12%.
Yeah.
So it's gone from 54% back in the 60s to 12% today. So it's not something that we can just ignore that's not really happening. Mm-hmm. It's really happening. So then what I thought I would do is take a look at, I live in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and there's lots and lots and lots of new construction on the fringes of the Phoenix metropolitan area. And there's a city where a lot of that new construction is ongoing. The name of the town is Buckeye, Arizona. If you look at the entire metropolitan Phoenix area, the median house price, this is over all areas, is $450,000. If you look in the typical area of Buckeye, Arizona, there are lots of new home construction going on there. So I thought, well, that would be a place I would expect to see kind of typically priced homes. Yet I could not find one home for sale that was for less than the median house price. I saw homes like $490,000, $530,000, $575,000, $850,000, $1.3 million. And when I started looking at what the median was of those new home constructions, it was about $600,000. So it's significantly higher than the overall median in the area of $450,000. Moreover, when I started looking at what was the typical square footage of these $600,000 and $700,000 homes, they were 2,500 square feet, 2,700 square feet. They were not what you would classify as a starter home, which would be 1,200 or 1,400 or 1,500 square feet. So something really is going on with the data, and I was quite honestly very surprised to see that. I thought I would start looking, and yeah, I can see there's some high-priced homes, but there's some entry-level ones over here. I didn't see that.
I think what you're saying is really also affirmed by this study that the Georgetown Center on Poverty and Inequality conducted. What they found was that in the 1980s, around 2/3 of the single-family homes that were constructed, they had 3 or fewer bedrooms. Now, if you go to 2010 to 2023, 58% of the homes had 4 or more bedrooms. Wow. So that percentage has kind of increased from 1980s. It was around 33, 34%. That has gone up to 58%. So what you are saying, what you're talking about in Buckeye, Arizona, really is borne out by the data across, this study was conducted across 6 of the largest metros in the US, and they found this similar trend going on elsewhere also.
Well, that's very interesting, because after I looked at the data, I was wondering, well, maybe I just happened to pick an area which was a counterexample, but your study from Georgetown seems to suggest the opposite. Well, I guess the next question that arises is, why? Why do builders keep building homes that are new that only the middle or high income earners can afford? Is it because they want higher profits? Is it because of zoning? Is it construction costs? Is it financing? Is it due to the housing shortage? I mean, what's the reason?
I think the reason is all of the above that you have mentioned here. And I think if we want more starter homes, more affordable homes, then we have to change the math that builders and the cities that approve their projects are operating under, because something somewhere is incentivizing the builders to build homes that are larger, that are priced higher, and that entry-level households or families, young families, are not able to afford.
Well, that's a valid point. And so one of the key issues, of course, that's been mentioned is the U.S. just doesn't have enough supply of housing. And that's borne out based on who gives you an estimate, but there's a consistent shortage estimate given depending on the source. Freddie Mac says U.S. housing market is undersupplied by millions of units with widely cited numbers of 3.7. Moody's says that number is 2 million. Goldman Sachs says 3. Zillow says 4. So there's no shortage of estimates saying we have a housing shortage. And I think that's very clear when we look out at the data. One thing I kind of looked at, which sort of speaks to that again, another example, I live in a community that has 750 homes. And I remember back from about 2000 until right before the financial crisis, so say 2007, if I looked on the MLS, I would routinely see 40 or 50 homes for sale in that community of 700 homes. There were wide selection available all the time. And I would say since 2020, that number rarely, if ever, exceeds 10. Right now, for example, there are 7 homes on the market. So just a few years ago, that number was, almost 6, 8, 10 times more. So it isn't just fictitious that there's a housing shortage. There really is a shortage.
Yeah, and that is also, we keep reading about it, that so many buyers are just bidding on properties. They're very few and far between that they can bid on, that they could afford. They keep getting outbid, and then they have to resort on rentals or multi-generational living. So this shortage is very real. People are experiencing this shortage. People are living this shortage. And also this affordability crisis that I talked about a little while back, just to quantify that number, in 2019, or in the fourth quarter of 2019, the average or the median principal and interest payment for a mortgage was around $1,000. And by the end of Q4 of 2025, that payment and interest increased to more than $2,000. So that has increased, that has doubled in size. So we have here not only a short supply of homes, there is a high cost involved, and that is the backdrop on which we are going to talk about why builders are building homes that only the rich can afford.
So an interesting indicator, if we look at what sometimes is classified as a classic starter home, which is 1,400 square feet. The census data shows that in the early 80s, a fairly large percentage of homes, 40%, were in this starter home category. Whereas today, or back in 2023, I should say, only 9% of the homes were in that category. Yes. That's a pretty dramatic reduction in the numbers of starter homes that are available. I know when I look back in 1989, and I've probably said this story like this before, I just date myself more than anything, but I bought my first house when I lived in South Florida back in 1989, and it was a starter home. It was 1,500 square feet. It was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garages. I don't remember very many homes at all that were less than 1,200 square feet or greater than about 1,800 square feet. Wherever you went, the new communities, those were the sizes of the homes. You didn't see communities where homes were 2,500, 2,600 square feet. I would be able to go, there would be 6 models available. I would say I really like these 2 models. One might be 1,500 square feet, one might be 1,525. They both had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2-car garage. I would pick the one I liked the best. The prices would be very similar. The floor plans would be slightly different. But that was the selection I had back in 1989 of a new home. And that's what selection everybody had for a new home back then. and my neighbors were teachers and accountants and engineers, and it was everyday working folks like me that were my neighbors. It wasn't, retired couples. It was people you would expect to buy a new home. Well, it seems that's virtually impossible to find these days.
That's true. I mean, you keep hearing about teachers who don't have enough income to buy a new home. In fact, in 2024, the median size of a new single-family home was above 2,200 square feet. So we see this trend that homes are getting larger. And of course, that means that the price of homes is getting higher. So I think to understand why this is happening, why this is the trend we are seeing, we need to understand the builders' spreadsheets, the builders' incentives that makes them build these larger homes. So basically, a builder is not deciding, oh, I'm going to build a small entry-level home, or I'm going to build larger homes. I think what determines which projects they undertake is clearly dependent on their financing issues, and they also face a huge number of risks. So they, to justify those risks, they need to produce enough profits, right? So we need to understand the costs that the builders face, the all kinds of regulations that the builders face, the financing hurdles that the builders face, which tells us why they are building larger homes.
Okay, well, and also builders have large numbers of fixed costs that they have to pay as part of producing a new home. So they have to purchase the land, of course. They have to prepare the lot. They have to get the permits. They have to pay the impact fees. They have to do the hookups for water, for sewer. They have to put infrastructure on the site. They have other inspections that have to occur all along as the home is being built. And a lot of these, for example, if you have to hook up a site to water lines and sewer lines, well, those costs are the same whether the house is 500 or 1,500 square feet or 2,500 square feet. There's one water line, one sewer line that's being connected from the main line at the street that's taking water in and out of the house. And so the builders want to offset that fixed cost across a larger revenue stream that they get from the larger homes.
Yeah, and also I came across this data from the National Association of Home Builders. What the data says is that a huge percentage or a huge share of the final price of the house is attributable to costs. They found that 64% of the sales price was construction costs. There were another 13.7% costs that they attributed to finished lot costs. And there was an additional 11% that was attributed to financing costs, overhead and general expenses, marketing, and sales commission. So which left them with a profit margin of 11%. So what that means is that when construction costs and other costs are so large that they have such a large share of the final price of the house, if the builder wants to reduce the price of the house, they either have to shrink their margins or they have to offset their costs somewhere else. And so this is why the cost or the final price of the house remains high.
Well, there's even a NAHB study on the regulation in the price of a new home, which estimates that the government accounts for 23.8% of the final price of a new single-family home. So there are regulations imposed by various levels of government. So the builder just cannot get away from that particular percentage, and that's been going up as the years progress.
And the regulation costs involved both at the development phase and at the construction phase. And so to give you some kind of examples, when the builder is developing a lot, they have to incur costs which involve zoning approval. There are requirements to mitigate environmental impact. They have to pay for utility hookups. There are some impact costs, and they have to dedicate land to government for maybe a park or something like that. Then there are community design standards such as sidewalks or landscaping. There are labor safety standards. So and during the construction phase, they have to secure building permits, they have to pay inspection fees, and they have to adhere to architectural design standards. So plus what all these regulations do is that they cause delays, which means higher financing costs. So regulation, as you can see, forms a huge percentage of the final price of a home.
So it's not, doesn't sound like it's builders that are willingly choose to do this, the larger homes. They're doing it for survival.
Yes.
And one other aspect that is driving this behavior are labor shortages. So the Home Builders Institute Construction Labor Market Report estimated that skilled labor shortages imposed an economic impact of about $10.8 billion a year, including lost single-family production due to these labor shortages of about 19,000 homes. So what does that mean? Well, that means that it takes longer to build a house. Clearly, the builders have to carry, they have construction loans, for example, they have to carry that cost. Maybe instead of the house going up in 90 days, it goes up in 120 days. So they carry those construction loan costs for an extra 30 days, which costs them money. So they'd rather do that on a more expensive home, which has higher margin, than on a more entry-level home.
So even if you have builders who may want to deliver smaller, cheaper homes, they face another major hurdle, and that is land use. So there are many metros where the most desirable land is restricted to single-family only zoning, and they may be restricted to larger lot size, low density, extensive setbacks, parking minimums for each home, and design standards that can actually increase costs. So even if the builder has a desire to build homes, they cannot do that because of the zoning laws that are in place for a particular metro or a land parcel.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Rena, because I see all the time, especially in areas near the central part of a city, where the houses have been there since maybe the 60s or 70s. They're fairly large lots. They have mature landscaping, but the house is very old. And so what happens? Somebody buys the house, and the first thing that happens is they tear down that house, because there just aren't any available lots close into the city. And people want to live in the center of the city if they can, not 45 minutes away in the suburbs. Well, what happens if a builder buys that lot and tears that house down? They're not going to choose to build an entry-level home on that lot. They're going to, because that teardown cost incurs a lot of expense. And they are also going to want to build a house that has the same similar character as the current neighborhood, which is likely going to be a larger home.
So these rules effectively mandate that builders build higher cost homes. I mean, if the lot has to be big, if the neighborhood has to look a certain way, then the builder cannot really put this small basic home on the lot, right? And also, builders have to fight existing homeowners because they don't want high-density homes in their neighborhood if the existing neighborhood has a low density of homes. So, homeowners don't want that higher traffic. They don't want schools to be overcrowded. They don't want that extra parking issues or traffic issues. And ultimately, they think that the property values will decrease if higher density, smaller homes come up in the neighborhood.
What's interesting, you mentioned that, Rena, because I actually have some friends in Phoenix, Arizona, and a house next door from them was purchased. What the purchaser, the buyer of that lot wanted to do was to tear down the single family home that was on that lot as their next door neighbor. They wanted to build 4 condominiums. So they wanted to be 2-story condominiums, very high density, of course. And the neighbors immediately were very against that. They did not want to take what was a family of 3 or 4 living in a single house to now suddenly having 10 or 12 or 15 people living in that same space, and the associated parking problems, associated noise. And even though that would have been a viable solution to get more density, they were against it. So what did they do? They went to their board of commissioners, their county commissioners. They said, hey, this isn't fair. We don't like this. The county commissioners listened, and they voted it down. So it's not like it's something where we have these local boards that are doing things that are aggressive and mean. They're listening to their constituents, and they're trying to get reelected, and they're wanting to do things that make their constituents happy. And by and large, that's what's happening. So it's almost a catch-22.
Right.
If the builders would even attempt to do something to build a little bit smaller homes, they're stopped in their tracks in many cases.
So at this point that you're talking about, Fannie Mae actually conducted a survey to figure out what people think about the zoning laws and building affordable housing. So what they found is that most consumers, around 82% of them, are in favor of building some type of new housing in their neighborhood, but they are really not in favor of building high-density homes. So when they were asked specifically about building more affordable housing, renters were significantly more likely to be in favor than homeowners. 73% of the renters said yes to it, they were in favor, whereas only 44% of homeowners were in favor of building affordable housing. Additionally, they were also asked if they would support changes to local zoning codes or regulation. And again, only 37% of homeowners were in favor of that versus 63% of renters. So there is this real, resistance to building denser neighborhoods, more affordable housing that comes not just from builders or, the city regulations and such. It comes from the existing homeowners as well.
Makes sense. So I guess really the bottom line here, if land is expensive and approvals are difficult, builders say, okay, if I have to fight to get permits, if I have to pay all of this regulation cost, which we said a little earlier was 20 to 25%, build what maximizes a return. So what is that? Larger homes, more upgraded homes, which of course have higher price tags.
So yes, so I mean the builders are, what we are also saying is that builders not only are facing all those kind of restrictions and financing hurdles, because they carry loans for construction and buying land, they face interest rate charges. Interest rates are changing over time. Then there is a volatility in raw material costs and material costs. And also then they face demand shocks. This is what we saw in 2000, 2008, right? There was a lot of new construction and suddenly the market crashed and then the demand was wiped out for homes. So they face huge cancellation risks. So it serves them if they build fewer homes with higher margins rather than many homes with very small margins. Because when they build homes that are priced higher, they know that the rich buyers, people who can afford, they really are not so much impacted by changes in the economic situation around us.
Sure. And that's borne out by the data. I mean, for example, if we look at 2025 sales data, it showed a jump in the sales of homes valued at 10 million or more, even while the broader market overall remained a little on the sluggish side. And I again, kind of couldn't believe my eyes. I was recently vacationing in Melbourne, Australia, and I was visiting some friends, and we were walking down the street, and it's a street that has lots of older homes, and those have been converted into lots of smaller apartments. And so I pointed to one of them that was under construction, and I said, "What are they doing? Getting a new roof or whatever?" And they said, "No. What they're actually doing is this was a flat, or this was an old Victorian home built back in the late 1800s, and it had 6,000 square feet. And in the 50s and 60s, it was converted to 600 square foot apartments. And what they were doing now is converting it back to its original 6,000 square foot single family home, because there was so much demand for that product. And so they're calling that process, in Australia anyway, they're calling that, not surprisingly, remansioning.
That is so interesting. I mean, you do see that what you just pointed out, that really high-end homes, expensive homes are, they're not seeing any shortage of demand. There's a surge in demand for such homes. And here is another part that seems very counterintuitive, if you think about it, that the housing shortage that we are seeing right now is actually pushing builders to build pricier homes. And if you think about it, because of the housing shortage, the price of homes is bid up. And these are the comparables against which the builders are building, right? So now the builders find themselves with more room to ask higher prices, because not only are the existing homes older homes, they can differentiate their new homes by their newness, They offer more warranties, they offer more amenities, they offer more upgrades. So because of that shortage of home, really, if you think about it, builders are now supplying homes that are priced higher.
Correct. And even when builders do try to reduce the sticker price, they do it through things like a smaller square footage, but still not at what we would classify as starter home square footage. They do it through rate buy downs. So they will say, we will take a discount on the price by giving you a lower interest rate than market, maybe for the first 5 years of your mortgage. Or we'll build on cheaper land that's not in the center of the city. But they still don't completely step away and get to the starter home category.
I mean, to be fair to builders, they have responded to this demand for smaller homes, and they have reduced kind of the square footage of homes. But this reduction in square footage is in comparison to just a few years. This is not going back to the 1,400, 1,500 square feet homes. I mean, there's still 2,200 square feet homes. So builders have tried, but it's only a marginal improvement in terms of affordability for the consumers.
So it sounds like really what we're left with here is we have fundamental barriers that are in place that I don't think are going anywhere anytime soon.
Yes.
So we have zoning, which limits smaller lots and higher density. We've got whether those are resulting from neighbors not wanting that. We have high regulatory and permitting costs to offset that development. We've got labor shortages that there's no quick fix for that. So that's going to add pressure to the builder's bottom line with holding costs for construction. We have land and infrastructure costs, like we talked about with adding those water to a site. That's fixed, and it doesn't scale down if the house is smaller. Finance structures that actually reward margin. So yes, builders can tweak at the margins, but it's all of these things collectively are still pushing the builders toward the upper end of the market.
So what we are saying is that if we want builders to produce more homes that middle income and low income buyers can afford, we need to shift the math, we need to shift the regulations. So something that can be done is that regulation, we have in place regulation that legalizes more homes. So there are smaller lot sizes, which means more townhomes, more duplexes, more ADUs are built. So land costs per unit come down. And many cities are now allowing ADUs or accessory development units. And for example, Phoenix, California has allowed this for a while. Then there are other states such as Oregon, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Connecticut that are allowing the building of ADUs. So slowly that there is a change in regulation that is happening. But again, that change is really slow right now.
And the neat thing about ADUs, I think, is that allows someone who owns a fairly large lot, maybe with a home built in the 50s or 60s, maybe they own an acre of land, instead of selling it to someone who then bulldozes the house and tries to build 4 townhouses, it says you're allowed to build an auxiliary dwelling unit up to 1,000 square feet at some point on your property, where then you could rent that out and have a couple or a small number of people live in that, provided there was ample parking and egress for them. That's an innovative solution and a solution that I think more municipalities are attempting to do.
I think what would also help builders is if the regulatory burden is kind of reduced. I mean, if they streamline permitting timelines, if they reduce the redundant reviews that builders have to face, and they kind of modernize codes so that delays are reduced, because uncertainty is expensive for builders, as you pointed out. So, there are these things that can happen at the city level, at the state level, which can perhaps help builders to put up those low-cost, affordable, smaller homes for people.
And as we mentioned earlier, the percentage of folks who purchased a home and were married by age 30, when we look at the average age of the first-time home buyer, that's actually soared in the past many years. So 40 years ago, back in 1991, 40 years ago, or back in 1991, let's say, that was 28 years old. At the time, back in 1989, don't do any math in your head, but I was 25 when I purchased my first home back in 1989. So 28 back in 1991 was very normal, very common. When we look at 4 years ago, that number had gone up to 33 years of age. So maybe not a drastic increase, but now it's exploded to 40 years of age, which is, quite shocking, I think.
Yeah, and another cost of delay in homeownership, NAR has estimated that a 10-year delay in homeownership could mean losing out about $150,000 in home equity on a typical starter home. So you have these impacts that you are seeing on, the shortage of starter homes.
Wow, that's very, very interesting information. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, both Rena and I think, were surprised when we started researching for this particular discussion today at the data, and in some sense, how sobering it is.
Thank you for your insights, Eric. I think this has been a very interesting discussion, and I hope you find that too. You can find us on Spotify and iTunes. I'm Reena Agrawal.
I'm Eric Fox. Thank you for joining us.